She knew the law. She enforced the law. But when a power-hungry cop pulled her over and refused to acknowledge who she was, things quickly turned dangerous until karma struck back with full force. The road was nearly empty, just a stretch of highway cutting through the night. Streetlights flickered past, their glow reflecting off the sleek black paint of the sedan cruising steadily in the right lane. Cassandra Blake had been driving for nearly an hour, her mind still occupied with the classified meeting she had just left. Being the newly appointed FBI director meant long hours and even longer nights. But she was used to that. What she wasn't used to, what she didn't expect, were the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her eyes flicking to the speedometer, exactly 65 mph, not a mile over. No erratic driving, no reason to be pulled over. And yet the patrol car behind her didn't budge. She exhaled through her nose, signaled right, and slowly pulled onto the shoulder. Years of experience told her there was nothing to worry about. She had worked alongside law enforcement her entire career. She knew the procedure. She understood the system. But as the patrol car came to a stop behind her, something nagged at the back of her mind. The officer was taking too long. Cassandra adjusted her side mirror, trying to get a glimpse of him. The car door finally opened. The man who stepped out wasn't someone she recognized, which wasn't unusual. She didn't make a habit of memorizing every highway patrol officer in the state. But something about the way he moved caught her attention. His stance was rigid, almost aggressive. His left hand rested on his belt, fingers idly curling near his gun. His right hand swung a flashlight, sweeping it back and forth as he approached her window. Cassandra pressed the button to lower her window, keeping both hands visible on the steering wheel. "Good evening, officer." Her voice was calm, professional. The man leaned in, his flashlight beam lingering on her face for too long, too invasive. "License and registration." No greeting, no reason for the stop, just that. Cassandra suppressed a sigh. This wasn't normal. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" she asked evenly. The officer chewed his gum, staring at her longer than necessary before replying. "License, registration." Cassandra didn't move immediately. Instinct, the same instinct that had saved her life countless times, told her this wasn't going to be simple. She needed to control the situation before it escalated. Carefully, she said, "Officer, I'm reaching for my wallet on the passenger seat." No response. She moved slowly, retrieved her wallet, and handed over both her FBI credentials and driver's license. The officer didn't take them. His eyes flicked to the badge, then back to her. "FBI, huh?" She nodded once. "Yes, officer." Silence. "Then step out of the car." The words weren't loud, but they hit like a slap. Cassandra blinked. "Excuse me?" The officer took half a step back, his right hand now hovering closer to his gun. "Step out." The air thickened, pressing against her chest. There was no reason for this. She had followed procedure. She had identified herself. And yet this man, this officer, was treating her like a threat. Cassandra had seen situations like this before. Not firsthand, not like this, but she had read the reports. She had seen the footage. She would not become a headline. Her pulse remained steady, but her mind raced through scenarios. She knew how quickly things could spiral. She also knew how to survive. But before she could decide her next move, the officer's patience wore thin. He reached for the car door handle, and that was when she knew this wasn't just a routine stop. This was something else entirely. But Cassandra wasn't about to let fear dictate what happened next. Because she had spent her entire career preparing for moments exactly like this, and she wasn't about to fall without a fight. The click of the door handle made Cassandra's body jerk. Not out of fear, not yet, but out of razor-sharp alertness. Her left hand shot out, gripping the handle from the inside before Officer Lucas Barrett could pull the door open. "Officer, step back," she ordered, her voice firm but controlled. "You're violating protocol." Barrett didn't move. If anything, his grip on the handle tightened, his knuckles turning pale from the pressure. "I told you to step out." Barrett yanked at the door. "Officer, step back," she repeated, her tone sharper but still controlled. "You are violating procedure." Barrett remained motionless. The only thing that changed was the way he clenched the handle even tighter, his knuckles whitening further. I said, "Get out of the car." Now she could hear it, the cold edge in his voice, the barely restrained effort to maintain control. Cassandra had dealt with men like this before, men who mistook power for dominance, who pushed boundaries to see how far they could go. But this wasn't some power-hungry bureaucrat in a suit. This was a man with a badge, a gun, and an anger that made him dangerous. Her grip on the door handle tightened. "On what grounds, officer?" For the first time, Barrett hesitated. His lips parted slightly, as if searching for an answer. But instead of replying, he did something worse. He took another step toward her. The flashlight in his left hand remained aimed at her face, blinding her, reducing his figure to a shadowy silhouette. "I don't have to explain myself to you." Cassandra didn't blink. "Actually, you do." The beam from the flashlight didn't waver, but Barrett's jaw tightened, irritation replacing whatever restraint he had left. "Listen, I don't care who you work for." Cassandra's heartbeat remained steady, controlled, but the reality of the situation was shifting. This wasn't just aggression or an officer overstepping his authority. He wanted her to be afraid. And fear was something Cassandra Blake never allowed herself to feel. "Then call your superior and see if he cares," she said coolly. That sentence broke Barrett's composure. The flashlight dropped, and before she could react, his free hand slammed down onto the roof of the car, a sharp, echoing sound cutting through the still night. I said, "Get out of the car." For the first time, Cassandra glanced at his name tag, Barrett. She would remember that name. Her fingers itched to reach for her phone, but she knew any sudden movement could be misinterpreted. She had seen it happen too many times. So she kept her hands visible, meeting his eyes with the same unwavering gaze she had used in countless interrogations, the kind that stripped a man down to his very core. "You're making a mistake." Barrett let out a low, humorless chuckle. "No, the mistake is you thinking you can use your position to intimidate me." And that was when she saw it, the shift in his stance, the slight twitch of his right hand near his waist. He was considering it. The air between them grew heavy. Then, another car approached. Red and blue lights flashed across the scene as another patrol car pulled up behind Barrett's. For a brief moment, relief flickered through her. Another officer meant a witness, meant accountability. But then she saw who stepped out. Another white officer. Tall. Broad-shouldered. No visible name tag under the harsh glare of the headlights. Barrett didn't even turn around. That told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't backup. This was an accomplice. The second officer stepped up beside Barrett, his gaze flicking between them before settling on Cassandra. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. Barrett smirked. "Just dealing with an uncooperative driver." Cassandra remained silent for a brief moment, weighing her options. She was outnumbered, and Barrett knew it. The second officer took a step closer. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Not FBI Director Blake. Not Mrs. Blake. Just ma'am. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. This wasn't a tense overseas negotiation. This wasn't a failed tactical mission. This was home. And right now, home was just as dangerous as any battlefield. She inhaled slowly, calculating her next move. Because if she chose wrong, she wouldn't be the one writing the report tomorrow. They would. Cassandra could feel the tension pressing against her skin, thick and suffocating. The second officer positioned himself slightly behind Barrett, a silent show of unity. This wasn't law enforcement anymore. This was a display of power. Her fingers tightened slightly around the steering wheel, her mind working through every possible scenario. If she refused, they would escalate. If she complied, she would be at their mercy. There were no good choices. "Ma'am," the second officer repeated, his voice disturbingly calm. "Step out of the vehicle now." Cassandra exhaled slowly through her nose, her heartbeat steady despite the blaring warnings in her head. She had negotiated in situations where a single wrong word could mean someone's death. She needed to stay in control. With deliberate slowness, she reached for the door handle, keeping her other hand raised and visible. Barrett stepped back slightly, giving her just a sliver of space. The moment her foot touched the ground, the cold night air sliced against her skin, amplifying the adrenaline surging through her veins. Now, she was vulnerable. Barrett towered over her, his body angled just enough to block the view of the dashcam. The second officer remained a step behind, covering any blind spots. She had no doubt they had done this before. "Turn around," Barrett ordered. Cassandra didn't move. "You still haven't told me why I'm being detained." Barrett's nostrils flared. Suspicious behavior. What behavior? He smirked, shaking his head as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. Failure to comply. This was a trap. Refusing to comply would justify an escalation. Complying meant submission. She knew this game. She had read too many reports just like this. Then he grabbed her wrist. Too hard, too fast. Instinct kicked in instantly, her body shifting just enough to step back without appearing aggressive. "Take your hands off me," she snapped, her voice cutting through the night. Barrett didn't let go. The second officer stepped forward. "Do we have a problem here?" Barrett tightened his grip. "I think she's resisting." Those words sent a sharp twist through her stomach. The second officer reached for his radio, his lips already forming the words that had justified countless unnecessary escalations before. "We have a non-compliant suspect." Suspect. Not a citizen. Not the FBI director. Just a suspect. And then the gun appeared. Barrett didn't hesitate for even a second. His hand dropped to his holster, unfastened the strap, and before she could react, the barrel was inches from her face. Time warped, slowed, twisted around them. Cassandra had been trained for crisis situations. She had faced gang leaders, domestic terrorists, violent criminals. But this was different. This wasn't a war zone. This was an empty road, and she was unarmed. Her breathing remained steady. Both hands were raised, palms open. Every instinct screamed at her to act. But she knew exactly how that would end. Silence strangled the air. Then Barrett spoke. "Do you feel powerful now?" Something shifted inside her. This was never about a traffic stop. This was humiliation. For a split second, her vision blurred, not from fear, from anger, not for herself. For every name she had read in reports just like this, the ones who never got to tell their stories. She opened her mouth, choosing her words carefully because they might be her last. But before she could speak, a voice rang out, slicing through the tension like a blade. "Hey, I'm recording this." The voice came from the roadside, shattering the moment. Not just words, power behind them. Someone had seen. More importantly, someone had proof. Barrett didn't lower his gun, but the shift in his stance was immediate. A brief hesitation. A quick glance toward the voice. Cassandra turned her head slightly in the same direction. A man stood near the edge of the road, phone raised, its screen glow reflecting off his glasses. He was at a safe distance, but close enough to capture every detail. Close enough for the whole world to witness. "You sure you want to do this, officer?" the man asked, his voice calm but weighted with the gravity of the moment. Barrett clenched his jaw but didn't answer. The second officer took a step forward as if calculating a way to regain control of the situation. But they were no longer in control. Cassandra saw it in their eyes, the calculations, the panic creeping into their authority. They were used to operating in the shadows, in the silence of incidents that no one recorded. But this time was different. Barrett exhaled sharply, his fingers still gripping the gun. His next move would decide everything. Cassandra knew she had to push him to the edge. "Put the gun down," she commanded, her voice cutting through the air, stronger than before. Barrett didn't move. His breathing grew shallower, his mind working furiously to find an escape. The second officer's radio crackled. "Unit 57, report your status." A beat of silence. Then sirens. Distant at first, then growing louder. Backup was coming. But not the kind they wanted. Barrett's grip on the gun loosened slightly, lowering it just a fraction, but he didn't holster it. He turned to the second officer. "Make him stop recording." Cassandra's stomach tightened. She knew what that meant. The second officer moved toward the witness, one hand dropping to his belt, searching for something. No, not this time. Cassandra stepped forward, her voice sharper than before. "Touch him, and I will personally see you charged with obstruction of justice." That stopped him. For the first time, hesitation filled the air. The balance of power had shifted just slightly. The sirens grew louder. Mere seconds away now. Barrett was no longer looking at her. He was looking through her, past her, at the flashing lights speeding toward them. His mind was already turning, searching for a way out. Cassandra recognized that look: desperation. And desperate men always made reckless choices. She had only seconds to ensure she survived this. But would that be enough? The sirens wailed, piercing the air. Red and blue lights flashed, reflecting off the pavement as multiple police cars skidded to a stop. The witness kept his phone steady. The red recording light gleamed like an unblinking eye. Cassandra didn't dare move. Barrett still held his gun, but his stance had shifted. The confidence, the untouchable arrogance, had drained from his face, replaced by something tighter, something closer to panic. Car doors flew open. Officers spilled out, hands hovering near their holsters, but no one had drawn a weapon yet. They didn't know what they were walking into. Then, one of them recognized her. Director Blake? The name sliced through the tension like a gunshot. Barrett barely reacted, but the second officer went rigid. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The officer who had spoken, a lieutenant, judging by his badge, looked around, assessing the situation. Cassandra stood there, hands raised. Barrett still held his weapon. The second officer hesitated, unsure of his next move. And then the witness, still recording every second. Cassandra seized the moment. She lowered her hands to her sides, not in surrender, but as a declaration of control. "Lieutenant, I want both of these officers arrested. Immediately." The order was clear. Unwavering. The second officer took a step back. "Wait, not another word." Cassandra cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade, slicing through any excuse he was about to make. "I know exactly what just happened, and so does he." She nodded toward the witness, whose phone remained fixed on them. The lieutenant hesitated. She could see the wheels turning in his head. This was no longer just a routine stop gone wrong. This was a career-ending disaster for anyone who tried to cover it up. Barrett realized it too. Finally, his fingers uncurled. He let the gun fall back into its holster slowly, deliberately. But his expression was full of hatred. Cassandra met his gaze head-on. This time, she wasn't the one who was afraid. "This is a misunderstanding," Barrett mumbled, his voice so low that even he barely believed his own words. Cassandra tilted her head slightly. "Oh, then let's clear it up at headquarters." She turned to the lieutenant. "Call internal affairs. Call the prosecutor. This isn't getting buried." The second officer swallowed hard, his face turning pale. Finally, the lieutenant acted. He turned to a nearby officer. Handcuffed them both. Barrett's blood boiled. "Are you kidding me?" His voice was hoarse, filled with the outrage of a man used to getting away with things who was only now realizing that this time he wouldn't. Cassandra didn't blink. "You pointed a gun at the FBI director, Officer Barrett. If you'd like, I can add resisting arrest to the list as well." She had spent her entire career watching justice, almost happened seeing cases get tangled in bureaucracy, watching victims be treated like criminals. But not tonight. On. Barrett was still gasping for air when the handcuffs locked around his wrists. The second officer didn't resist, only staring at the ground like a man who had finally realized he had bet on the wrong side. The lieutenant turned to Cassandra. "Director, do you?" "Get them out of my sight," she said, her voice like ice. And just like that, it was over. At least this part of it. Because Cassandra knew this wasn't just about two bad cops. This was about a system that had allowed them to exist, and she wasn't going to let that continue. But what happened next was bigger than tonight. The cuffs on Barrett's wrists weren't just metal. They were the weight of consequences, the kind he had spent his career avoiding. He stood frozen, his face twisted in disbelief as officers led him and his accomplice to the patrol car. He still believed he would get away with it. Cassandra had seen that look before. Men like him always thought they were untouchable. Until they weren't. She took a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Anger wouldn't help right now, action would. The witness still stood on the sidewalk, phone lowered but still recording. His eyes met hers. "You okay?" he asked. Cassandra nodded. Thanks to you. He hesitated. They do this all the time, just not to people like you. The word stung in a way she hadn't expected. Because he was right. This wasn't new. The only difference was that this time she had the power to do something about it. More officers arrived at the scene, some glancing at Barrett and his accomplice with open contempt. The lieutenant from earlier approached Cassandra. "Director Blake," he began carefully, "do you want to prosecute this personally, or?" Cassandra shook her head. "This isn't personal. This is systemic. I'll be filing an official report first thing in the morning, and I want internal affairs on this immediately." The lieutenant exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Understood. She wasn't done. "I also want full access to both of their disciplinary records. Complete transparency." He hesitated. Cassandra met his eyes. "If you think I'm going to let this get buried, then you have no idea who you're dealing with." Silence, then reluctant acceptance. "All right, I'll make the call." Good. Because this wasn't just about one wrongful stop. This was about everyone that had never been recorded. The footage hit the news before sunrise. By noon, the Department of Justice had announced a formal investigation. Barrett was stripped of his badge and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. His accomplice was suspended indefinitely. The police department released a public statement, one of those carefully worded damage control statements. But the world had already seen the truth, and the truth had consequences. Cassandra watched the news from her office, her fingers interlocked beneath her chin. The story was spreading rapidly, and she knew what would come next: the calls, the press conferences, the political maneuvering from those who would pretend to care while secretly wishing she had let it go. But she let nothing go. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Normally she wouldn't answer, but tonight she did. "Director Blake?" A pause, then a familiar voice, the witness from that night. "I just wanted to say that I really appreciate what you're doing. Most people wouldn't." Cassandra leaned back in her chair, a slow breath leaving her chest. "Most people don't have the power to." A pause. Then, softly, "But I do." And for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Justice cannot exist in silence. It only comes when people have the courage to stand up and speak out. Cassandra Blake's story was never just about an unusual traffic stop. It was a powerful reminder of power, abuse, and the relentless fight for justice. We witnessed a strong woman stand up for herself, refusing to let fear or oppression push her into the shadows. But this raises a bigger question. How many others are not as fortunate? How many have been pushed to the margins of a system where their voices are ignored? It's 2025. How far have we truly come in the pursuit of justice and equality? And how much further do we still have to go? By 2030, can we live in a world where everyone is treated fairly, regardless of race or background? That depends on what we do today. We can start by asking questions, refusing to turn away from injustice, and using our voices to demand transparency and fairness. Every small action, a conversation, a vote, speaking up can contribute to systemic change. What do you think about Cassandra's situation? Do you believe that in 5 or 10 years we can see a better world? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every story, every perspective has the power to create change. And if you believe that justice is worth fighting for, follow the channel to help spread more meaningful stories. This story is entirely fictional and created to raise awareness. It highlights issues of accountability, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly stand against violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.